Hey, coffee experts. Those of you running independent coffee shops, you're always looking for ways that you can drop your costs. And we here at the Coffee Experts Club really understand that. And so we've started something called Indie Coffee Coalition. And what it's designed to do is to drop your costs on two of the things that you're probably experiencing the highest sales volume in your store. And that is energy drink and frat mix. Those two line items, we've created our own products and are offering you those products at a reduced cost so that you can cut out the Red Bull of America. You can cut out the main lines of energy drinks that you're doing and serve your own energy drink at a reduced cost on a line item that you're probably already making a lot of sales on anyway. The best way that you can grow sales is by dropping your costs and maintaining a current volume. So check us out at indiecoffee.co and we'll love to tell you more there.
Welcome to the Coffee Experts Club, where we discuss all of the insights, expertise, and drama that goes into making your passion your profession. Our hosts, Aaron, Ben, and Drew, are three coffee experts who have taken their coffee experience and turned it into true expertise. They have consulted with major coffee brands throughout the United States and beyond, providing operations expertise and growth strategy for drive-through openings, multiple locations, and everything in between. So brew yourself a cup and hang out a bit with the Coffee Experts Club.
Coffee Experts Club, boys, we're here.
Hello, hello. Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Oh man, Ben Clatterback, you remember the good old days of Ted Lasso? Remember when we could just like talk Ted Lasso every day and I could have the Ted Lasso theme song playing?
That ended with the series.
And I made Brandon on our team watch Ted Lasso like he hadn't caught up on it, so we did it. And every time we sat and watched it, because he was living here for a little window of time, every time that she sat down to watch it, I made him watch the intro song. I'm like, no, we don't turn this off. He's the best part of the thing, Mumford and Son singing about Ted Lasso.
Oh my God.
Oh man. Well, boys, we had a really good session last round. If you missed Coffee Experts, if you haven't watched Ted Lasso, do yourself a favor. Go in there. No, but seriously, Coffee Experts, thanks for joining us. We had a great round last session with Susan Arando from Good Grounds Coffee up in Adair Village, which is a little tiny community just outside of Corvallis, right off of the 99, right off the highway. And, we had a really good conversation, I thought, because not only does she have a beautiful drive-through, I mean, you can go check her out. Her drive-through is pristine, great job, but she has a whole nother business model tucked into her business model of not just her drive-through coffee stand, but also she talked a lot about having a coffee trailer. Something that she pulls around to events. That's actually where she started. It's actually how she made her name. And I thought it would be a good thing for us to talk about that a little bit about, we talk a lot about drive-through coffee here. If any of you are thinking about starting drive-through coffee, or somebody that's thinking about starting drive-through coffee, this is the place, Coffee Experts Club. We talk about it day in, day out. We've got decades of experience. We bring some of the greatest professionals out there doing it. But this gal was really interesting because it's like, not only is this drive-through coffee, yes, she's doing that. She's doing great with that. But she also has this coffee trailer. Ben, what were your thoughts on that, man? When she started talking about coffee trailers, because we kicked it around a lot here, talking about, could that be considered another quote unquote door?
Yeah, in total honesty, I was not expecting. I typically shy away from trailers. That is also a big reason for that is where I am locally, trucks and trailers are tough. So I typically shy away from them, but she really blew my mind on how successful you can be with a coffee cart or truck style coffee. And I was so intrigued. I was like, how did you make this happen? Like, how was it? Would you do it again? How much work was it? So she really blew my socks off. You can go back and watching, even she says like, she wouldn't recommend it just for the amount of work and the lack of consistency in your clientele, like in your customer base. But she's definitely proof of the pudding. If you put your sweat, blood, and tears behind something, you can make it successful. And she definitely did. So hats off to her. It's total kudos for really making that thing successful. And then smartly, I think it is shifting that into a brick and mortar. She's made it, like you said, made a name for herself. The community knows who she is. The community loves her. The community wants her everywhere they go. And then to be able to shift from that to a brick and mortar and have that consistent customer base, I think was so smart. But yeah, I went into that one thinking, oh man, I hope this isn't I started this coffee cart and I had to close it 3 months later type interview, but she did awesome with it.
And I think like what my take home was from her as she was talking about it, my take home, because my take home was a little bit different from that. I think it's a phase thing, right? I think it's like, where are you inserting your coffee cart? You know what I mean? Because a lot of people ask us, we have people that we drop things on the social. Hey, ask us anything. We're going to talk about it on the podcast. We've had a lot of people ask about, hey, what should I think about starting? Should I think about a coffee cart? And when I mean coffee cart, it's like something that you're pushing around still, right? Something that's like a standalone, but isn't motorized. Or should I think about like a truck or a trailer, which is what she's talking about, right? Or should I do a drive-through? Obviously all those have a different barrier of entry with cost, right? And you have your basic machine cost, but then depending on other things, obviously a motorized transport is much different than a coffee
Yeah.
cart you're going to push and pull places, right? But I think that a lot of that could be, well, where are you at financially? Like if you're a young family, if you're or a young couple, you're a young entrepreneur, you don't have a lot of capital, it's probably going to be easy for you to pony into like something like a cart or maybe
Mhm.
something like a trailer. I think a truck becomes more expensive even than a trailer. Getting into a coffee shop, yes, it's still a pretty low barrier of entry compared to other franchises or other businesses. We've talked about that a lot on this show, but it still is hundreds of thousands. I mean, I don't think it's like, it's not just an easy, like quick grab. Whereas a trailer, a truck, a cart, all those are easier point of entry. And maybe that's how you begin to make your name. And I know that's was Susan's thing, right? I think that her complaint wasn't so much the inconsistency as much as now that she has both going, that's tough, right? Because now she's like, she's trying to lean into her drive-through, but the trick with the truck or the trailer is that could get booked out whenever. And then she's kind of split on how she's using her resources, right? Like
Yeah.
where she's using her labor. And I did think one of the things, Ben, that I thought was really interesting, and it's probably something you and I don't think about a lot because we're always like talking a lot about established traffic count, but just the unpredictability of the traffic count with your cart or trailer at an event, because the event coordinator is going to sell you on how big an event's going to be. So
Yep.
then you buy all the milk for that. And then you get there and you're like, oh, that's rad. Like less than a quarter of the people you told me were going to be here have actually shown up. And then what do you do then?
Absolutely. I actually, it made me remember one of my first job in coffee was a local coffee shop. And that coffee shop, they had 3 locations that oddly enough turned into Roasters Coffee.
Yeah, that's crazy, crazy story. Yeah.
But one of the quote unquote locations they had was a vendor stall inside of the Coliseum here, which is where hockey games would go on, like, concerts would go on, comedy shows. And I remember I would work that. A, it sucked, but B, nobody ever wanted to be scheduled that shift because it was if it was a hockey game, you knew it meant that there's breaks in the hockey periods and you would get blitzed with 90 customers in
Right.
like 20 minutes.
Right.
Or what would happen a lot is we would get a shift at say like a comedy show or a concert and it would just be dead for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And we would just sit there with all this product. So it made me think of that. It's like a total like toss in the air. Like, am I going to have customers today or not? Whereas, obviously with the brick and mortar, once you're established, you're fairly established. You have a consistent run. But yeah, like I remember those days of like, you hated and loved that shift. You hated it because it was either 90 customers in 20 minutes or you loved it because you're like, I just got paid here as a 18-year-old kid to sit down for 4 hours. It was always a toss up. But yeah, the unpredictability can be tough, especially when it comes to your cost of goods, especially when you're paying, hourly, three or four hourly kids to just sit there and sit on their hands. You're like,
Yeah.
gosh, what, throwing money out the window.
You and I talked about this a little bit before the show as we were framing it up, but I think that it's got to be a mindset that you're coming into a cart or a truck with. And that is, hey, we're walking away from an hourly rate, right? Like, I think that if you're going to be the owner of it, like you're saying, hey, I want to leave my desk job. I'm going to start doing this coffee cart, this coffee truck, and I'm going to realize it's going to be done more on a profit basis. And then you get really honest with your profit. Like, how much am I spending? How much does it cost me to get into this event? And then holding that against your sales and making sure it makes sense financially, right? You've got to think about those things and then only do events that make sense. But in some ways, I think like this, the younger generation of influencers has really ruined the younger generation's understanding of how to make money. I think that either you have money that's going to make money for you, or you have blood, sweat, and tears that's going to make money for you.
Sure.
But you don't just get to make money for doing nothing. Like you've got to do it one way or the other. So either you've earned enough money, right, that your money's going to start helping you work for you. Maybe you don't have to work as long or as hard because you're going to make investments. You're going to invest in this. You're going to invest in that. Those things can have returns. But until you get there, you kind of are trading your soul a little bit for making money if you want to lift up beyond just an hourly rate at a entry level job, right? So in my mind, what I told Susan was, because now Susan's in the situation, right, where she has this brick and mortar and she has this trailer, and she's like, man, the trailer, I love doing it, but it's so hard to know like where it fits. And my counsel to her was, hey, I think you should think about getting a young couple that's a partner that you could just bring in or with you that would actually drive the volume of this. The expectation is to be a partner. You have to come in with a certain amount of hours. And then you, Susan, have earned that spot of owner where you've made the capital investment. You've bought the trailer, you've bought the machines. Maybe it'll go in on cost of goods. And this young couple, maybe they come in and they're just going to make revenue based on hours. And it's not going to be like an hourly rate, but it's more going to be like they're a partner in it. And then tell them, hey, and I want you to book out at least 10 events a month.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And then they're just going to know they have to do that and they can strategize with you. But I do think that when it comes to a business model like that, where it's not just another storefront that you can just hire kids who've done coffee and have an expectation, I do think that it has to be something where you're like, hey, we're making a trade here and it's a little bit of a business model and it's going to look a little bit different. But I do think it could be really cool for raising up next generation. Maybe at some point you sell that part of the business off for the sake of building another brick and mortar. Maybe it's
Yep.
like an entry level. You know what I mean? I think there are a lot of really cool things. Maybe that's the entry level for a franchise, right? Maybe you're like, for Susan, I want Good Grounds to be a franchise and I'm going to franchise out the cart, and then you still have recurring revenue that comes in. You provide the beans, you provide certain things to that cart. Maybe there's probably going to be an owner lease, right? They buy back from you this trailer at some point and the machines that are there. I think you could do some really creative, cool stuff that is a different business model than we talk about a lot here on the show, which
Yeah.
is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking to that young entrepreneur, it's a much lower risk if you've
Yeah.
never been in business before. I mean, like she even said, she learned everything on the fly in the middle of it. So if you've never been in business before, it's a much lower risk to go with a cart or a truck than a 20-year lease on
That's
a
it.
brick and mortar building. Like if you get, a couple years in and you go, holy cow, what did I get myself into? This is a huge mistake. I gotta, eject. A lot easier to do that with a cart or a truck than a lease that you're strapped into that you've probably financed on the backside of your own home.
You can always find another young sucker, right? Like you're like, sell the dream, man, sell the dream. And the truth is that sounds really negative, but the reality is one man's trash is another man's treasure, right? Maybe you
Mhm.
get to a point where you're super burned out on something, but that doesn't mean that's how everybody feels about that thing. So don't undersell your asset. You know what I mean? If you're
Sure.
in that position today, you're thinking about, man, Aaron, you are just singing our song. Ben, you just described my life to a T. My encouragement is, hey, get a market value. Like find what the market value is and then ask yourself, how bad do you want to get out of this? You know what I mean? Because maybe you have to take a little bit lower than market value. Sometimes, we do valuations for customers a lot. A lot of times people will come and say, hey, what do you think of this? Hey, consider this business model. Hey, I'm thinking about investing in this. What are your thoughts on that? And so we'll always tell them, Ben, you and I talk about it all the time. We'll talk to them about, well, what's the traffic count, right? What
Mhm.
is it, an A, B, or C location? You know what I mean? Like that tells everything because you're going to only get a percentage of how much traffic is passing by you. So how many cars, how much visibility you got? How easy is the ingress egress? You know what I mean? Like that should contribute to your valuation. How much are you grossing a month? You know what I mean? Like, are your books clean? Because they're going to want to see your P&Ls. How fast are they going to make their money back? You know what I mean? Like once they make an investment, like those are just the easy, basic questions that you're going to work through on an evaluation. But then once you come to that number, like ask yourself, well, am I okay with waiting a little while on releasing this piece?
Yep.
Or do I want to really get out from underneath it and then market it like that? Hey, market value is this because XYZ. Take all the questions off the table. Don't let them come at you with some bunch of random questions. Here's the answer to this. Here's the answer to this. Here's the answer to this. Market value is X. I'm willing to take this. No dickering, and then see how it goes. But I think that understanding the season you're in and understanding it's okay that this was part of my business model at the beginning, may not be part of my business model forever. And how can I get a return back on it? I think that's really important for people to think about the lifetime value of their business.
Hey, experts, we've got something really awesome that we do here at Coffee Experts Club, and that's called the My First Drive-Through Coffee Masterclass. So if you're opening your next coffee shop, I think a lot of times you may think to yourself, I know what goes into opening a coffee shop. I've been doing this for years, but maybe you've been doing it for somebody else. And maybe this is your first option of starting a coffee shop on your own. Or maybe you don't know anything about coffee and you're just like, I'm looking for a good investment opportunity. Starting a coffee shop seems like a good place to put it and you're going to enter into it. But what you don't know is all the things that you don't know, right? And so what we've done with this masterclass is taken behind the scenes how you find your first location, what you need to be thinking about in finding a location. We give you a gift in the masterclass where it's a step-by-step process of how you're opening your coffee shop, the different checkpoints you need from coming up with your plans and talking with the city and then negotiating a lease. And then how do you build a team and what are the different pieces you need to be thinking about? It's a great masterclass, door to door, start to finish, completely free on opening up your next coffee drive-through. So check it out. It's at myfirstdrivethrough.coffee, and it's a great masterclass. You won't regret it. We'll see you on the inside there.
Yeah, I mean, what the business that I was talking about with the Coliseum, that started out, that was called Espresso World here in the Tri-Cities. They were arguably one of the first coffee shops in our area, period. They were pre-Starbucks. I think they opened up their first shop in 93.
Wow.
So it was like way back then. But they used
You're
to,
so freaking old. I can't believe how old you are.
but the owner, they wanted to do something else. They actually, totally transitioned into, they built like a beautiful day spa and salon. And they're like, we don't want to do coffee anymore, and sold to roasters, and roasters then became the biggest brand and coffee shop brand in the Tri-Cities. So it's definitely, don't undervalue your assets, because you don't know what those assets could turn into. All you can do is value them at what they're valued worth now. And that is totally dependent on how much blood, sweat, and tears you put into it. But like you said, if it's still under, if the fair market value for your brand, your shops, your locations isn't what you want as a golden parachute, can you stick it out for another year? Work those sales up a little bit more. I mean, that's the business model of so many clients that we have, even, is just, I want to grow this business to year 12. If I'm at that mark at year 12, my whole entire goal is to sell the company.
Mhm.
Roasters did the same thing. Like, we exploded. We were huge, biggest brand. And what do you know? You've got BlackRock coming knocking on the door. Multiple people come in knocking on the door and say, hey, we'd love to pick up 15 shops in your area. That'd be great.
Yep. Which is great. And let's talk about that for a minute. Because, we talk a lot about roasters here. That was the origin for all of us in coffee at some level or another, at least especially our professional ability to consult. It was growing a brand from just onesie twosie shops all the way up to 15 a roastery, and then exiting to BlackRock, so like it's a big jump and a big growth. And what every independent coffee owner out there probably is looking for, right, is own coffee for a certain number of years. I think Wes owned it for 9 or 10 years, right? And then exit. You make millions of dollars on your exit. I think it's the dream. But let's talk a minute about, it cost Wes a lot too. Like the very beginning, like he talks about leveraging his house to get in and starting that first one, and to get into Road 68, number 2, really big deal. You know what I mean? Like you had to really twist Tim Bush's arm to even consider building with him in that. And then I remember when we argued to get up into Southridge, like that was another big developer that was outside of our area that was like, we don't know roasters and we would much rather a Starbucks. And Wes, he had to promise them part of his income monthly on
Yep.
top of the lease to get them to sign it. But he knew it was a great location. He knew it was going to be across from a hospital. He knew it was going to have some good things in the future, but he had to wait for that. That location didn't just come off the hook banging. You know what I mean? Like, I think it probably does great now with the baseball fields and the hospital and those things, but that took some years to get it there. And I think Wes risked a lot. Like Wes was over leveraged a lot, and it led him to this great exit that was amazing for him. But I just want to tell everybody that looking into this, maybe you're young, you're starting a cart, you're thinking about some of the things we're talking about now. We're talking about assets and what are their value and how do you sell them off and seasons of business. I think just to acknowledge it's going to take some risk at the beginning, and you've got to come into that knowing it, and you have to have a threshold of risk, right? Like how much am I willing to risk? How much am I willing to lose? I talk about my first business a lot, and I ended up having to close the thing down. It was a heartbreak, and I had leveraged half of my home in order to do this business. And man, I'm still paying down that debt. It's been closed since 2008 is when I closed it. You know what I mean? Like we're talking about years ago now. But like that, I would have had my mortgage paid off by now, but I don't because I went into this business model. But I think I got a great learning curve in the loss, and I think if you can come into it with that mindset. And I had a threshold when I exited that business. I wasn't willing to gamble any further. There are other people that said, no, just keep gambling, keep putting money in on it. But I knew I was going to risk my house if I wasn't careful on the debt to income ratio. And so I think come into it with an understanding that this is going to cost you something. It's going to cost you blood, sweat, and tears, or it's going to cost you a pretty penny. But the other side of it is you're building into a business asset that if you run it the right way, find a mentor, find somebody that's going to help you consider your costs, look at your costs, look at your successes, get a second pair of eyes on it where you're getting a consultant's view on what are things that you can make your coffee shop better, produce more, and then realize you're growing an asset that at some point you might want to sell. So like for some of you that are listening, there may be a point where you want to work yourself out of having anything to do with the day-to-day job of the coffee shop, because you can probably hire somebody cheaper than you to run it day-to-day, and that's going to make your books look better, which is going to help you when it comes to selling it, because people are like, oh, look at your profitability. Be careful out of your business because that's going to affect your books.
Yeah, I mean, I know the fear of most owners, and there's a shop here locally that There's a big fear in growing. I mean, I can think of one company in particular that's had a single location for more than a decade.
Yep.
Uh, and there's a big fear in growing because, obviously that incurs a growth in responsibility, a
Yeah.
growth in stress, a growth in your management team you have to hire. So all of that increases. But the thing is, so do your profits and your potential windfall if you do want to sell down the road. If you have two locations, you add a third location, a fourth location, the fifth location, your desirability grows exponentially. And
Yep.
it just accumulates. If Roasters was just two locations, BlackRock would never look at the Tri-Cities.
That's right.
Or Roasters had 13 locations here locally, 14th in Walla Walla, 15th going up in Spokane,
Yep.
which catches the eye of somebody who says, okay, hey, I have millions of dollars to come in and just buy your location. So yeah, it's scary to open a second, a third, or fourth location, but it's only when you start doing that. I mean, we talk about it all the time. That's where the true I can get off bar and I start making real money.
Yeah.
Just if you're the owner, that's where you start making real money. But if your goal is to at some point sell, that's not going to happen if you just have one or two locations. That's going to happen when you have 5 plus. And if that's a goal of yours, then it's going to take work. But that potential profit that's where I say the risk to profit ratio far outweighs the growth far outweighs just keeping in one location. Not to mention the fact that with just one location, you have just one small subset of a customer base.
Yeah.
If I have a Tri-Cities is, I think metropolitan area is almost 400,000 now. If I have one location in one city, I'm missing a huge portion of the entire customer base in the Tri-Cities, which means if that one location does bad, say goodbye to my business. But if I have two
Mhm.
locations, well, one might be able to float the other for a little while. I
That's
have
right.
three locations, then I can spread my costs out even more. If I have 4 or 5 locations, then the monetary risk of that business goes down dramatically because I'm able to float expenses across locations if I'm having a bad, 6 months or something like that.
I think you totally nailed it on the head is you're spreading out your risk. I know it feels
Mhm.
like growing your risk because you're opening more locations, and in some ways you are, right? That's more leases, that's more bodies, that's more pain points, that's more, but I think that some people live in the mindset of if it's one location or maybe even two locations, I can still stretch myself far enough to span all of that. But like, I feel like that's a broken mindset. Like you should be looking to replicate yourself and exit from the daily, like replicate yourself, exit from the daily. EOS talks about it. It's Entrepreneur's Operating System from the book Traction by Gino Wickman. Talks about delegate and elevate. The way that you're able to elevate up is to delegate down. So, what requires your brilliance? What do you love to do? Sure, stay in that up to a point. But like, if it's going to start hindering the growth of your business and your desire is to grow, then sometimes you have to realize you become the choking point. Like, and so how can we identify, okay, so what should you be doing as an owner? What should you not be doing as an owner? How can you pass duties down? How can you deputize and empower people, right? Still quality control, right? I'm going to trust but verify. I'm going to make sure that they're still showing up strong in the things that I commit to them. But the only way that you're going to be able to continue to grow is to be able to hand that stuff off.
Mhm.
And then as you hand that stuff off, the beauty is like the reality is Ben, you and I have been under the hood of dozens of coffee shops now. Like the reality is that no chain, whether it's independent or franchise, not every location is a ringer. I mean, like we're going to be those that like barely break even, but it's a brand extender, right? It's like, yeah, but we branched to that town. And is it, are we killing it off that one? No, but it was an opportunity for us to market and spread out, like you were saying, to be a regional brand. And as I open the third round, that one could be a ringer that helps carry that one that
Yep.
wasn't. And rising tide's going to lift all ships. And then when I open a fourth one or a fifth one, it begins to spread like the costs and you get a better bite, a better pricing tier probably in your buying
Mhm.
volume, cups, commodities, right? Beans, every one of those things, you're going to get a drop in your cogs the more that you spread out. And so, yeah, you're taking on a larger risk, but you're also finding greater advantage, which is also growing the value of your business, like you were saying, Ben. And it does then draw attention of a large brand that's like, I do want a regional footprint there. I could go open locations at maybe 1 or 2 a year. And then like it would take me 8 years to get your brand stretch roasters, or I could just in 1 year buy you and have immediately, I'm on the scene, 15 new locations with my name on the side of it. And as long as the revenue's strong, it's a good business decision because they have that capital to invest in it.
That's exactly what BlackRock said. There's no BlackRock's east of like Ellensburg, on this side of Washington. They had zero footprint here, and they were
Yeah.
literally they had a growth goal of opening X amount of shops, in the year that they purchased roasters, and they were actively looking for a brand that could give them a footing into an area that they hadn't been in before.
Yeah.
And so was 13 locations in one metropolitan area. We were like a golden goose to BlackRock. We were like, heck yes, we want that. All we got to do is slap some paint on it, change the name, and all of a sudden we've got, shops that are producing, millions annually. Like, why would we not jump at this chance? So I think that's all hard to see when you just opened your first coffee cart, right? When you just got the truck, and it's hard to see that far down the road. But I think the whole moral of the story is, don't be afraid of that growth, because unless you start multiplying, that will never happen. BlackRock doesn't come in and buy a single truck. They'll come in and buy a fleet of trucks.
Sure.
If that's how they want to grow, and they see that you've got a fleet of 40 coffee trucks that are producing really well, that might be what they want, but they're not going to come in and buy just one. You have to actually grow to the point where you get there.
Yep. I love it. All the things, Ben, all the things you never think about until you have to think about it. So, hey, coffee experts, thanks for hanging out with us today. Definitely a great episode where you're thinking about trajectory, how you're growing your business. Ben, always an honor to speak with you. Yes, coffee experts. We'll see you next week here on the show.
Thanks so much for joining us today. For those of you who are looking to become a coffee expert yourself, we offer an incredible, thorough training online for opening your first coffee drive-thru at www.myfirstdrivethru.coffee.